This is a Back to One bonus episode. It's the audio of a Q&A I moderated with Dylan and Sean Penn on the opening night of their film Flag Day at the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn. This is August 20th, 2021. Right before I walked down the aisle to step on the stage, I asked, "This is being recorded, right?" And the answer was, "No." So I frantically whipped out my phone and hit the record button on the voice recorder. So needless to say, it's not a very good recording. I cleaned it up a bit and I edited it just to make it more listenable. But I think you will be very happy that it was captured. I am happy it was captured. And I'm a big fan of this film, Flag Day. It's starring Dylan Penn and Sean Penn, and he directed it. And this is a wonderful Q&A, I think. So without further ado, here it is.
Dylan, I heard that you said no when your father asked you to do this movie, like many times. Like 10, you say 10 times he asked you.
Over 10 years worth of time.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So what,
Yes.
so what was your apprehension?
I just never thought immediately I wanted to act. I was always interested in film, but always behind the camera, whether it was writing, directing, producing. That's still, I think, where my passion lies. But I read the book and I loved the book, and I actually thought the reason he was coming to me was to suggest another actress to play Jennifer, like Kristen Stewart or Dakota Fanning or something. But I also just felt too young, and I didn't have enough life experience to bring to Jennifer. And then, well, yeah, almost 15 years later, I'm 30 now, I had a change of heart.
Thank God, right? I mean, Sean, after the 9th or 10th or 11th or 12th no, you know what I mean? Like, why did you keep going? Because you must have realized how risky this was, right? To have your daughter act in something that, like, this isn't like the reboot of like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days or something like that. This is a very grueling work that she needs to do emotionally and all. Like, so what was it that made you think that she can do it?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing in the sense that I had such complete confidence that there was this actress in her from the time that she was very young. And neither her mother or I wanted them to, get caught up in the movie business when they were kids. But there was something so special in this one that she was, I don't know, maybe about 16. I read this script and followed by reading the book. And when I read the script, immediately Dylan's face was imprinted in it. And of course, had she made it at that time, she would have only been able to play the teenage years. It would have, one could have made this with 3 actresses or 4 actresses, and so there were different approaches that might have been over that time period. But the problem for me was that once I got to page 30 or whatever it was where her face was all I could see in reflecting this story, there was no alternate version for me. And so, of course, the first ask was gentle enough that she thought I was asking her for casting advice, as she said. Then I think when she was in her early 20s, there was an opportunity with a lot more money than we ultimately were given to be able to make the film. On the idea, I think that largely it was the thought of, from the financial point of view, that the idea of a real father and daughter was a marketable thing. Then, so I went to her and I said that, we have an opportunity to do that thing again. And she had as little interest as she had initially. And then it came back around. I had to encourage the producers to move on because I wasn't going to do it without her.
Wow.
So then it came back around, and when I was talking about doing it, I was never going to direct and act in it. I was either going to act in it with her, or I was going to direct it with another actor. And that's where we were 2.5 years ago. It was about 29 or 30 days out from starting principal photography when that actor fell out for family reasons, and which forced me to jump in and now do both. And I'm so glad that happened because I would never have elected to do it because I just wanted to focus on one thing at a time. But having been pushed to do it, it's, this incredible experience of being able to act with the face that was always this movie.
Yes. So did this make you more nervous, though, that now your dad is going to be the guy that you're playing off of? Or was that a relief that you knew that was going to, because he's a great actor, too. I mean, what was going on in your mind?
I know he's a great actor, but he's also just dad,
Yeah.
And I just think the idea of working in general with family in a professional environment, and when you've never done it before, it can be disastrous or it can be great. Fortunately, it was great, but it was I spent 2 months getting to know the actor that was going to play John, trying to build that chemistry. So it was kind of funny that the first scene we did was in the diner, and as soon as I sat down in that booth and he called action, I felt like such ease, and the nerves were just set aside, and it was really just a lot of fun playing off of him because obviously he gives so much as an actor.
So, and I promise we're going to get to questions. Don't let me hog them, okay? But so it's so interesting that was the first scene, Sean. And I've heard you say that once you had that first scene, that even the first take, all your worries went away about her having never done anything like this before.
No, it was even worse than that. I didn't actually. I went on a tangent from your question because your question had to do with, wasn't I concerned? It wasn't until we went through the first take, seeing the revelation, her do that I realized I had blindly assumed she could do that. And so it was almost as thrilling as it was, as moving as it was, the overwhelming reaction was relief that I had not set her up for a fall.
Right. Can you just talk about, in movies before this that you have directed, what your approach was for directing actors? I've heard you say a really interesting thing, which was that you like to get everything prepared, but if the actor brings something, you're willing to throw that away. I think that is really important based on what they're giving you, and you adjust your plans. You were talking about that in the interview.
Well, I'll just use a metaphor. I mean, in kind of engineering terms. I know what room is demanded to tell this story. For this scene, what's this scene's purpose within the story, right? So I have to decide on a room for that. Then I have to decide on the structural engineering of that room. And then, so I try not to bring more than that. There's no design, there's no paint, there's no carpet, and so then an actor can come in and just surprise you and bring you things. And even with, the real sense of a room, one of the things I like to do with actors is to bring them around to see all the sets, because there are times that somebody might have pictured themselves leaning, and if there's nothing to lean on, and so you'll ask actors for input of things that would help them, when you're still in pre-production and your carpenters are still on salary. Make adjustments then.
Can we talk a little bit about a specific scene, and maybe Dylan, you can talk about what that was like preparing for that scene? And the scene I'm talking about is the visitation scene in jail, where I feel like you guys both had to get somewhere to an emotional. It's almost like a roller coaster thing. You guys have to do a lot in that scene. So where was that in the shooting? What was that day like? What was that? Were you worried about that scene? What was going on in the production at that point? Talk a little bit about that day.
I love that you asked about that because I really wasn't, no one's asked me about that scene and I really wasn't nervous. Felt like it was going to be really easy. We'd done a few emotional scenes before that and it was the hardest scene I shot. I don't know how you felt, but it was just also like having that glass barrier. But I was also, sounds so silly, I was just in a really good mood that day. So it was just hard to, think of those horrific things you have to think of to get to the place and to like build up that rage, which I can imagine, Jennifer felt like just another fucking time he fucked up, So, and I think she was around that time, Jennifer. So I talked to her a lot about, her feelings around that time and she's so amazing. She's such a light. You would never guess that she's had this tumultuous past. And she just said simply, she was like, I was just really fed up because I'd forgiven him. And then he just doubled back. Yeah.
And what about you, Sean, for that scene? Like we're forgetting you've never directed yourself. So this is a magnificent performance, a magnificent self-directed performance, which sometimes is rare.
Well, you heard Dylan say what a good mood she was in that day. I was in the most miserable mood of any day on the shoot because I had been able to get so little sleep and it terrified me that I was going to fuck it up, that I just, and not be able to be present for both of us as a director for her, present and myself. And so, and what happened is that we got there with what on the surface seemed to be and was a beautifully written scene. And I found, beautifully written though it wasn't working. So we had to, I was rewriting stuff that my tired brain could hardly remember in the original writing. And so it was a day of just fighting that thing and saying, no matter what, we're going to I'm going to kind of keep fighting through because she had come to the party. It was really because I think that I don't think if it had been Dylan, I think if I just would have, not been able to get to a point, because I am proud of the scene for the movie, and but it was hard won. It was a hard one. And I think what Dylan said also is true because we could not, there's kind of a hum board in there so that, people can talk to each other, but it wasn't real. And so it was difficult to hear each other through the plastic. And we didn't have, even the sound department didn't have all the bells and whistles you would normally have to get simple things like that sorted. But I'm not complaining. I just happened to be in a bad mood that day.
Does anybody have a question? Right here.
So for actors, a lot of the times they say they're able to relate to their character. I guess the question is, how were the two of you able to relate to the characters you played?
Sure. Well, when I guess really the most recent time I read the book and the script, I felt very similarly to Jennifer in the way that she was constantly striving to find her own identity without her past and her father and her mother defining her. And I think even beyond that, it's the reconciliation that your past, your parents aren't part of your identity, and the acceptance of that. I really, it sounds so spoiled, but I struggled with the idea of just being, Sean Penn's daughter. And it's funny because now I'm doing this movie with my dad. But when I was younger, that was always, the tag. So I just, I felt like after high school, I just moved here and waited tables and didn't use my last name. And I just related to Jennifer in that way.
I think for me, and one of the things that touched me about the story in the very first place is that you're always, any parent-child relationship is the child needing and seeking ultimate authenticity of their parent and who their parent is, and being unable really in their biorhythms to be deceived. And so even when it was a recognition of deception, something wasn't right, something wasn't safe. And as a parent, every parent, we're all dealing with peeling the onion of, whatever bullshit we, brought with us as we've come, forward in life. And always needing to evolve that way, I think, to keep becoming more present, transparent for the people that you love. And so this was just devastating, corrosive deception. And of course, as time went on, and as I'm grateful that for what Dylan was able to bring by waiting till she felt ready to do it, I think that those themes of corrosive deception became only more important to me to consider, given the amount of deception that we have been fed as a society of late.
Next question.
With so many filmmakers making films on digital, this is such a textual film. Why did you choose this particular film to shoot on film, actually?
Yeah, well, I had only made one film with digital photography as a director. And I just didn't trust it. I regretted having done it. I look at it and it has a plasticine to it. And I can be told 1,000 times how, the technology is there and to lay a synthetic grain on it. And I had used that synthetic grain in the movie that I'd made. But the problem is then you're controlling the thing that film ought to control. The film's imperfection should control that, and not so there's, synthetic is as synthetic does, which is never going to be human blood. And for me, because obviously, I'm very cognizant of people I don't agree with, which was that, I think Bob Dylan should have gone electric, And maybe I'm just one of those fuddy-duddies who's not really ready to go down the line, but having made a movie digitally with a great cinematographer, it doesn't give you the essential thing that film gives you, which is an organic passage of time. That grain is what represents time passing in film, I think.
This is for Sean. I'll be remiss to ask your man of many talents. Are the illustrations in the film yours?
The illustrations. So if you read Jennifer Vogel's book, which I recommend, because it much will be unfamiliar because I'm more like taking the short story in it and allowing it to breathe as a movie. But if you read her book, you'll find that there was another child, Jan, Jennifer's sister, along with their brother, Nick. And Jan, as it turned out, has the kind of DNA, the hand of her father, and she did the sketches for us.
Wow.
You guys did an incredible job acting, and I'm just wondering what the challenges were in being father and daughter, you know, and playing these roles.
Well, I think mostly, Dylan and I have talked about this before. There is a part of what actors try to do and do with rehearsal that, whether it's rehearsing a play for several months or in movies, we rarely get any kind of real rehearsal time. But she and I have had a lot of rehearsal time on the sense of each other's emotional flow, and language. And I think that though there are these very different things from myself and the character that I play, and with her, and very different things from our dynamic, nonetheless, it's kind of like our dynamic as people is like two guitars playing what we choose to play. Choose to be. Who do we choose to be? But if those same two guitars get together and they say, let's mess this up a little bit, and I'm going to play John vocal guitar and you play, we've still been playing together for her whole life, right? So there's a kind of something that you would get from benefit of a rehearsal. I think that helped us, and also that made it whenever she wasn't being asked to go into wrenching places. I think we had a lot of fun also.
You did not allow phones on the set, which I love. I love that. But, was that hard for you sometimes?
No. I'm the kind of person that loses 6 phones in a year, so that was very easy for me to put it down. But yeah, I mean, it was I also was using, he allowed this sometimes, but I was using Jennifer's playlists to kind of help me, especially in the goth period, and I mean throughout her life, but her music really influenced the way I, played each period. But it was so amazing to not, no one was allowed to have a phone on set, so everyone was so invested in the story. There was, a grip that read the script. I've never been on a set like that. And it really felt like a family, and, to go into those vulnerable places, I felt so supported and like I was doing family therapy, really, because it's with my dad and my brother.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add to that because clearly phones were not available like that when I started making movies, and something kind of sacred was lost in terms of the bubble that you create together. I mean, and I'm on a set, if I see an actor or a crew member just even peripherally, doing this, all that's telling me is that they're not in this game with us. And it's the same thing why I so prefer making films on location, because people aren't distracted by any of the normal things in their life. They're not having to get home quickly to see the kids before bed and all of that stuff. And you're able to create this kind of creative family together. And a cell phone is a real breach of the church to me. And so watch mine go off in my pocket.
Thank you so much. I think this is why people get inspired to go to film schools. So
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm wondering, watching this, I think it's mind-blowing what you both did as actors, obviously, and to direct this would be a feat as well. I'm wondering what your process was. Did you go through the scenes and then you watched the rushes, and then, as a director and an actor, also directing, obviously, your.
Yeah, see, I have been incredibly resistant to playback monitors because I, just know that the dependency, the you get locked into that being your only safe zone, and your eye is never on the actor. And there are things that the monitor won't see, won't feel. So I had not used one on my other films. And on this one I had to. And well, I mean, I had used them when I had multiple camera things. I had to do a lot of big scale things, but not too much. And in this case, I would have to have some playback. But in most cases, when it came to playback, I was looking to make sure on a take on Dylan, if it was a camera that I wasn't operating, because I'll operate a camera a fair amount, to check composition, but maybe just once, because once you check it, you know that the operator is doing something you like. And so you just let it go and see what else they do. But I would have to sometimes take a look at myself and playback, but I more often was making sure that when I saw a great take on one of the other actors, and in particular Dylan, it's Jennifer's story, that I could make sure I get that I got it, and it's in focus. We got this, and we can move on. But really, I think it goes back to what I was saying to Peter about this dynamic of bringing a kind of structure to it, but not more than that. What I was demanding of myself was to I would know if I got that much, and that was it. That's the only time I would take on myself. Sometimes that took less time, sometimes it took more time. But that's what I was looking for. I wasn't looking to create magic. It was just get that done, because all the focus needs to be, as it would have been even with another actor, on whoever's playing Jennifer, and the more time and all. But I didn't have to negotiate the ego politics of two actors, because I knew who I needed to be the great thing about this film, and it wasn't the guy playing John. And then with her, if I may, it's just because you've just had the experience, and I'm sure there's, everyone has their own opinion, but I will say that for me as a director, and I think anyone that knows about acting, we are always hearing about, how important it is, not only, like my acting teacher used to say to me, I'm having trouble with this speech, and she says, your problem isn't what you have to say, it's what the other person has to say. And all about listening. And Dylan not only listens so beautifully on screen, and is such a dynamic thing to photograph, but she never tells you what she's thinking when she's listening. She just thinks the thought. It's something that's been pounded into us as actors to do, and we think we're doing so often when we're not. But she really is just thinking the thought, and that way the camera gets to do its part of the dance. And the camera being you, an audience, gets to, if she's in it, and if her face is the map of the vista of this movie, which is sort of how I saw it, then that's what's key.
That's so beautiful, yeah. Do we have time for a couple more? Yes, okay, great. You, sir.
Clearly you come from a very solid place, so I don't delve too deeply, but my oldest is about to become 30, so I've been ruminating on the difference between who I am and who I strive to be as a dad. And so I can't imagine the density of these scenes and directing and acting, and I imagine that for both of you emotionally, there were moments, despite all the comfort and the professionalism and the solidity of your relationship, where you got to places that gave you pause in terms of navigating them. And of course, this particular dad was so damaged and so absent that it must have had moments of real emotional angst, and I just wonder about that.
I think that for the most part, it was really like acting with anyone else, only better. For some of the obvious reasons, but also for personal creative reasons. And, I'm not sure I'm answering. What I would say is that there were times directing Dylan and asking her to go to very tough places and watching her do it where the way I articulated it, so I wanted to call Child Protective Services on myself. And I really had this feeling of that, but at the same time, I know that if we're any other actor, that I know that they are thrilled to be going there. That's why they're acting, is to go, whether it's there or to blank joy or whatever. And so I got used to that, but really what it would be is just, I could get choked up by any pure moment she had, whether it was in one of those scenes or another, because it was just, such a special thing to see your daughter doing that.
I'll just add that I think it does give you pause in terms of really how grateful I should be to have two parents that really, fully, wholeheartedly love me and my brother, and to feel protected unconditionally. But also, the scene where I see John kill himself on live TV, that was the first time I saw it. It was live. A live feed. So I'd been there on the day that he shot that scene, but I just hadn't seen the playback, and I didn't see him actually shooting himself. I just saw the action of the roll of the car. So that was that's actually my real reaction. And it was one of the first times, he's always going to be my dad at the end of the day, but it was one of the first times that I really felt like, holy shit, like I can imagine my dad killing himself and looking into the camera, which is at me. And I started crying, and then he started crying behind the camera. And it was just too much. It was a little too much, but so meta and actory to even say that. But it was really interesting as a psychological experience.
I wasn't crying about you, though. I was just so sad Sean died.
Yeah.
Let's try and squeeze a couple more. Okay.
I feel like so much of the story was told without dialogue, and so I guess this is a twofold question. How did you decide when you were going to allow the story to play out the dialogue and with music telling the story? And then for Dylan, how did you prepare to tell that story without the luxury of dialogue?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it goes to something. When I started directing movies, the first two movies that I made were, just original screenplays, just ideas of mine. One was based on a song, but in terms of the bulk of it, another one was just an original screenplay. And so I knew that I needed to have ownership of the material, feel like, if not written it, then feel like I had. And what did that mean when it came to my third film? The third film, which I think was The Pledge, was written by a wonderful screenwriter. So when I took it home, my revisions were far less writing revisions than they were that I loved the cinema of let's say like Harold and Maude, where songs are used as a character or as well, or even The Graduate, where Benjamin's kind of reflected in these Simon and Garfunkel songs, and I really loved that kind of cinema. And so what I would do is go through these scripts and say, where do I want that and what does that song need to be to tell me this with what images so that I can cut the scene, just cut all the dialogue out of the scene or change it from a dialogue scene to a different environment where it's not a dialogue scene. And with this, that was the case also. Yeah, so I went, it was really where I did my revision on the script and cut out some fantastic writing because Jez Butterworth, I don't know if anybody saw The Ferryman or Jerusalem on Broadway, but he wrote both of them.
And really quick, you also said that like in the editing, you consider that almost like a form of writing. It's like the film is being written again in the editing process. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I like to be a footage collector more than I like to be a director. And that I like to take that footage into an editing room and use it to write with so that, so as you're stepping into something, it feels more like a question than an answer and something and the questions are all present in your own life, the things that are interesting you to think about at that time so that you can really go on the journey of reflecting on it. It's a reflection, it's a memory. The film is, that kind of my version of expressing that story in images, and yes, the dialogue, but the images are, and like I say with this one, I always knew that I was going to make this where the vistas were the foreground, meaning the faces, and in particular Jennifer's face.
Yes, I'm not afraid of close-ups. I love that. Okay, well, is there one more question?
You were speaking about, not really liking to use digital technology, but I really love, it's more of a comment, I love the use of vehicle technology to explore character and the emotional safety of characters and trust. Like the opening scene is obviously the police cars and your character's car, John's car, and also the plane versus the small little jalopy that came to see you where you worked, and all these big machines have the potential for danger, and very much in the opening sequence, one was an escape car and one was technically the dangerous car, but they were kind of reversed at the end. But I really like, the taxi taking your character somewhere safe for that character, but it was almost a dangerous vehicle for the family. And I just really liked that, aside from the cinematography being so, so essential to the facial, I'm getting a little off topic, but like the fact that the vehicles contained the characters so well and brought them to different places and were, safe or not so safe technology. I thought that was very interesting. At least that's what
Well, it's fascinating to hear, the way that you, with great interest picked up on that. The only part I play in that is that as you listen to you, I am hearing what I always feel is true, which is that character is plot and everything you see is a character. Everything you hear is a character. So, so it's a lovely observation. I wish I'd thought of it.
Let's thank them. What a gift it's